Yeah.
Okay, today I am interviewing Kenneth Lee about his experiences in the Navy. So, what is your full name?
Kenneth Anderson Lee.
When and where were you born?
I was born in the Clinton Hospital August 21st, 1941.
Okay, what was your childhood / family life like?
My family life.
Well, who did you live with?
Hmm?
Who did you live with?
I started off living with my Aunt Harriet.
Okay. Do you have siblings?
Then my father remarried. I guess I was about 5.
Okay.
And him and my Uncle Sam built a house in South Bolton. And then I lived there until I went in the Navy.
Okay. So how old were you when you joined the Navy?
$19? 20.
20?
20, yeah. Pretty sure it was. I worked 1 year after school, so yeah.
Where did you go to school?
High school was Worcester Boys Trade.
Did you do a trade there? Like, what did you do?
That was the machinist trade.
Okay. So did you have to do anything to get into the Navy? Like,
Just take a physical and go to boot camp.
what was boot camp like?
Awful. Because it was in the winter at Great Lakes. And you had to follow orders, and some of the things seemed to be stupid to me. You had to measure how much grass grew at night.
Where was that? The boot camp? Where was the boot camp?
Great Lakes,
Like
Illinois.
Oh, okay.
Near Chicago.
All right. So, what was the Navy like? Pretty
Well,
far.
in between that, I went to machinist mate school.
Yeah.
Thinking I was going to further my machinist from high school, but it was a totally different
Yeah.
thing.
All right. So just what was like a normal day in the Navy like? Like from the morning to night?
Out at sea,
Yeah.
you had 4 hours on duty, they call it, and 8 hours off duty, which comprised of 4 hours down the engine room for me, doing various jobs, and then I got the job of being a throttleman.
What's that like?
And that took care of opening the valve of the throttle, allowing steam into the reduction gears.
Okay. What time did you have to usually wake up? Was there a certain time?
6 o'clock, unless you had the early morning one, which was 4 to 8, and that meant you got up 20 minutes of 4.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, who was the war against at this time? Who was the war against at this time?
It really wasn't.
It
I don't-
wasn't.
No.
I don't hear.
It was the Cold War.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the Cold War, but we got stuck down in the Caribbean
Mhm.
and got involved with Russia setting up missiles aimed at the United States,
Right.
and that was called the Cuban Crisis.
Yeah. All right. So, what was the time period like? Like, who was the president, and what was just?
At that time, the president was John F. Kennedy.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, John F. Kennedy got assassinated, right?
While I was in, right?
You were on, like, the ship?
I was on the ship.
What was that like?
Well, we were all headed off the ship for Liberty, and there were extra MPs at the end of the pier.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to your ship. The president has just been shot. Well, nobody knew what was going to happen, whether the whole country was at war or what. Nobody knew.
Right. All right. What kind of ships were you guys actually on?
I was on destroyer for almost 4 years. And every time I went out to sea, while I was in the reserve program, they were also destroyers. So it was a destroyerman.
All right. What was the sleeping conditions like on the ships?
Well, it was 3 high on a destroyer.
3 beds high?
Huh?
3, like...
Beds.
3 bunks.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, but they were all hanging on chains.
Okay.
So when you got into really rough weather, you could move it up a notch and hook it on the next hole,
Yeah.
so that you actually had like a little funnel, like.
Yeah.
And you could, when you had that kind of storm, you crawled into your bunk from the end.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and because your bunk was like that.
I know. That's awful. All right. How many men were on the ship, do you know? Like, roughly?
About 100 and... We had about 165, but they always put more on if they're at war.
Mm-hmm.
They had maybe 20 officers.
Okay. What different places did you guys go to? What different places did you guys go to?
We went everywhere except in the Pacific. We went to Spain, to Italy, to France, all in the Mediterranean now.
Right.
Greece, the island off of Greece, down through the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
And we went to Afghanistan and what was the other one over there?
Jeddah and Yemen.
Yeah.
Where did you cross the equator? Was that in the Pacific or the...
No, that was in the Indian Ocean. We crossed the equator, and that was the Indian Ocean.
Okay. Let's see. What was the Cuban Revolution like? Or the Cuban Crisis?
Well, we didn't realize we were in it till it was just about over. But I know one thing. I had just got off a watch, and they said, take the inboard ladder, because they didn't want to open the outboard ladders, because it had, you know, the light would have shone.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, me, I had to peek out when I got at the after end. And they were shooting at us. And all our skipper did was keep, you know, going around and around, but he kept going back so that we wouldn't be hit, because the orders from the Pentagon was you can't fire
So
back.
they were firing at us, but you guys
They
couldn't
were
fire.
firing at us, and we could not return the fire, which I thought was not.
Yeah, that must have been like
Not
frustrating.
fun.
Yeah. Why were they saying not to fire back? Do you know?
Who
Rules of
knows?
engagement.
That's when the
Rules of
government gets involved.
Yeah.
Even worse now.
Yeah. All right. So at the time, the Cuban president was Fidel Castro, right?
What?
Castro was in charge of the Cuban forces.
Yes.
Do you guys like know anything about him? Like, do you have any thoughts on him at the time?
No.
You guys didn't know.
We never saw him. We never, our president and the Pentagon and all of that gave Russia, they kicked them out of Cuba, even though they didn't have any power over Cuba.
Yeah.
But they called it the blockade. Our ships prevented any more Russian ships bringing over these humongous missiles.
Mhm. All right. So I think you were in the Navy during 1963, right?
Yep, that's
Um,
when the president.
Right. Okay. Okay. How many years did you actually serve in the Navy?
On active duty, I got in 61, and I got out in 65. From January to January,
Yeah. Did you always want to be in the Navy? Was that like?
Well, I started to go into the Army.
The Army?
And when I got up to the recruiter, I ran into two guys I knew from Clinton. And they said, "Oh, don't go in the Army. You'll be in a hole and in the rain and mud. And you'll have to cook your own food out of a can." And I began to think about it. Gee, that don't sound like it would be for me. And so I joined the Navy.
Just
On
from
the
them.
on the buddy plan with them. And the first week in boot camp, Brownie got pulled out of the threesome
Yeah.
and had all his teeth pulled. And so Jimmy, the other guy, I went all the way through boot camp, came home on leave, and went back to machinist mate school.
Okay. So how did you know those two guys? They were just from Clinton?
Well, they had a band
Okay.
in Clinton called Jimmy and the Wildcats. Brownie, the guy that they pulled out his teeth, he was the piano boy. He could play the piano.
So when they talked to you, you just like signed on that day? Like, did your
Well,
parents
they were already signing,
know? Okay.
and I thought, well, it would be nice to go in with somebody I know
Right.
instead of being alone.
Plus, you wanted to see Norway.
Yeah, that was
And
the other
recruiter
thing.
told me
I thought
they'd go to Norway.
since a destroyer, you went everywhere. I thought, wow, I'll go to Norway.
All right.
Another thing that didn't happen.
I think, were you in the military reserves?
Yes, Navy Reserves.
The Navy Reserves. What was that like?
In the beginning, it was once a week we went to Worcester for classes, Navy terminology and stuff. And then we went to one weekend a month, and we went to Newport, Rhode Island. And what they did was they took like I had gone to machinist school,
Yeah.
and so they put me in charge of the valve shop on the weekend that I went down there. And a guy that was a carpenter, they gave him carpentry things to do.
Okay.
And that worked out pretty good, because then you didn't have to be always around for one day during the week. And you just didn't get anything accomplished.
Yeah. All right. What would you say was your favorite part of being in the Navy?
Visiting foreign ports,
Yeah.
getting to see things differently.
Yeah.
I saw the poverty in some of the countries, and
Like what countries?
we had a big barge that would a barge that came along the side of the ship, and we would dump our garbage and stuff in
Yeah.
it. And the barge would get over about 10 feet, and you'd see the guys picking through it. And
Eating
it just,
it?
huh?
Eating it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Or putting it in a can for
Yeah.
eating later, or to bring to their families. And it just,
Yeah.
that made me sick. I said, oh, jeepers, boy, do we live better at home.
Yeah. What was your food like on the ship?
It was good. We had good cooks. We had a black guy who got on our ship by accident. They ended up with more cooks than the rest.
Yeah.
And so they made him the baker.
Mm-hmm.
And he baked cakes and peach cobbler and all kinds of desserts.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
What would you say was like your worst experience about the Navy?
The worst?
Yeah.
Well, I thought being a shellback was one of the worst
What's that?
because
What's the shellback?
It's a big ceremony.
they
Huge.
made me crawl around the ship on my hands and knees, and both of my knees were all scun up because on the main deck they have this grit
Mm-hmm.
so you won't slip and go overboard, but when you're crawling on your hands and knees they start bleeding.
Yeah. Why?
And my hands were,
What was the purpose of it?
Yeah.
well, we got
Tradition.
into it was just like a Navy tradition, and
Yeah, it's up there, isn't it?
huh?
The certificate's up there.
No, that's the ship. You took it down.
No, it's
No,
underneath it.
okay,
It's
yeah.
underneath it.
They had guys on the ship that had already become shellbacks.
Yeah.
And those guys gave the ones that had never been across all the abuse.
Right.
And they had a big tent-like bucket at the end of the ship. And when you got done through the whole ordeal, you went down this chute, and somebody would say, "What are you?" And I said, "I'm a pollywog." I didn't have brains enough to realize it was over. And you're supposed to say, "I'm a shellback." And I kept yelling, and every time I said pollywog, they would dunk me back in this mess.
It's the thing of crossing the equator, and if the ship goes across the equator and one of the officers hasn't become a shellback, hasn't been
Yeah.
across the equator before, he's got to do the whole thing too.
Yeah, but he gets a little bit.
Yeah, he gets some special.
You don't
treatment.
get the haircut that we get.
Oh no.
What were the
You
haircuts?
stick your head out from a hole where the door came down for the hangar deck.
Yeah.
Stick your head out, and they went zip, zip. They put a big cross in their head, right down to the bone. And so when it was all done,
What? Gotta beautify you for a moment. I have to find a comb first.
I don't even want
anyway,
Any more questions?
How much time has it been?
20?
Keep going.
Keep going.
they would, you would peel off your t-shirt and your undies and throw them off the back of the ship, and as far as you could see were these white things all the way. Must have been a couple of miles. And
Yeah.
then a guy hosed you
How-
with salt water just to get all the gunk off you.
How often did you guys have to do that?
Only once. Next time, if we ever got to go over, then we would do it to somebody else.
Right.
There's no
Here, why don't you do that?
there's no water in it, so it's
Sticking right in.
like
Static.
frisbee. Here, hold that. Put it back. I know what I can do. I'll do this.
You get the full treatment, Kelly.
The hat that I use
Nice, the
to
Navy
go get
hat.
mail.
Nice. So did you have any other jobs besides the?
Well, I had mess cooking when I first went in,
Mhm.
and that was 3 months working in the galley.
Yeah.
One time doing dishes, another time bringing food down to the cafeteria. But
Do you like that job more than the other one?
that was only the 3 months. You always got that
Oh yeah.
when you first got aboard. I didn't know it, but
Right.
walking was a whole new experience for me, because when the ship, it goes like this.
Yeah.
When the ship is going down,
Keep going.
when the ship is going down and you try walking, your
Yeah.
feet go like that. When the ship is coming up, you have an awful hard time bringing your feet up because
Right.
you're working against the gravity. So, anyway, that wasn't too bad. I mean, I didn't have to go down to the engine room or anything. That's all I had was mess cook.
Yeah. What did you? I don't know if you said this. What was the name of your ship?
The USS Lloyd Thomas.
Nice. All right. So in general, would you say that you liked being part of the Navy?
Yes.
So you're happy you chose that over the
I'm
Army?
glad I bumped into those two guys because
You'd have been in Vietnam for sure.
I would have got Vietnam.
Have you seen them since?
Yeah, I saw Jimmy about 2 years ago. He lives up where that big fancy new hotel is, right at the end of Chocksett Road.
Is this Jimmy Grillo?
Grillo?
Jimmy Grillo?
No, not Jimmy Grillo. No, not Jimmy. Now it's gone.
Do you have reunions like every year for this?
I have a reunion now every year to go to the Lloyd Thomas reunions.
So everyone that was on your ship?
Yeah, but it doesn't mean everybody that was on when I was on.
Oh, true.
It could be people who came aboard it right from the beginning when it came down the slide, in the
Yeah.
Navy Yard.
Plank owners, they're called.
And they called them plank owners, and we only have one left.
Yeah. Well, they're all getting old.
Where is your ship now?
Where is my ship?
Oh, sad.
It's off the coast of
Taiwan. Taiwan, right?
Taiwan.
Sunk?
They sunk it.
Made it into a fish farm.
Made it into one of those.
Who
Like-
sunk it? The United States?
Mm-mm.
No,
Yeah.
we sold it to them, or
Sold it to Taiwan.
you might as well say we gave it to them for
To who?
say
Taiwan.
$100. I
Taiwan
don't
Navy.
know. But one of the guys that had been on the ship when we were was a businessman. He was an officer. He wanted to see, you know, what it looked like, if there were any changes. And when I was on it, the hull number was about like that big. And it was called 764. So when he got over there and he said to him, I used to be on this ship and I was up in the combat area,
Yeah.
yada yada. Would you mind me taking pictures of it? And you know, somebody taking pictures of another ship could be getting into trouble. But anyway, they rolled out the red carpet for him, and they had him up in the officers' quarters, and he noticed that the number on the ship had been changed,
Yeah.
and it was 911 was the number. They changed it from 764 to 911,
Why did they do that? You...
and they
Transfer
called
navies.
it the Dang
Yang.
Yang.
Dang yang. Very serious. Very loved their ship. Loved their ship. Like as much as you guys did, I
Yeah.
think. They were just devoted
We
to
were
it.
supposed to have one of their sailors come over on one of our reunions, but
Yeah.
it never happened so far.
Alright, well, that's pretty much it.
You can take these if you want. These will give you more
Yeah,
information
that'd be
about
cool.
Wanna
it. It's
stop
okay,
it?
right?
Yeah.
Kelly takes
Thank
the
you,
quiz
Grandpa.
books.